I've crocheted a lot of things. A 7-foot dragon, a 5-foot tall goose. Recently, I made a flower hat. I've turned myself into Greg. Heck, I've even turned myself into a mushroom. But currently I am embarking on an entirely new adventure in my crochet. And that is to make a fully boned crochet corset. In my 50 free patterns for spring and summer video, I found a pattern for a fully boned corset for free. The instant that I saw that pattern, I knew I needed to make it. While I do not own a corset and have not actually worn one, I've been considering adding one to my wardrobe for quite some time and just have yet to actually take that plunge. A while back, I ordered all of the hardware that I needed for this project, and I actually made a go at getting started. It took me, I think, 4 attempts to finally hit gauge, and I ended up having to order a crochet hook just to do it. It turned out, of all the hooks I owned, I did not own a 3mm hook. If you've watched my channel before and you've heard me talk about this corset on my previous vlog, you're probably thinking, man, it's been a while since you talked about this and gave us an update. And that is because I got frustrated and sat the project down when I realized after finally hitting gauge that I had made a mistake and skipped some stitches on a couple of rows, and now I need to frog the project yet again back to a point where I was hitting the appropriate stitch count and restart. I did not intend for this project to sit for months and me to ignore it. But you know how life is, especially when you have ADHD, you kind of roll with what sounds interesting right now. And I did not realize how long it had been since I had picked up this project until I decided to perhaps enter it into the fair. So that is what we are gonna do. We are gonna work on this corset. Now, the reason I decided to wait after realizing I needed to frog was that this yarn is not super friendly to the frogging experience because it is a tubular yarn. I am using Bernat Maker yarn, which is what the pattern is recommended for since it is a Yarnspirations pattern. But at this gauge, frogging it is kind of a pain. It does stretch a little bit and it's just not super fun. I was considering whether or not it mattered to me that I went down in stitches a little faster than was intended. If I'm going to enter this project into the fair, I am going to need to frog it and do it correctly. So that is what I have decided to do. I am just going to frog the project and hope that we don't need to lose any yarn, and that if we do, it won't be so much that it causes a problem and we are unable to finish. So now it is time for us to do what every crocheter just sarcastically loves, and that is to rip out hours of your hard work. As always, I'm stalling standing here, so we're gonna move the camera and go over here and get frogging and then crocheting. We are already starting things off on the wrong foot by not actually hitting record on the camera when I thought I hit record. So yeah, we've missed the footage of me frogging everything. You can see me using up the last squiggly spaghetti bits of frogged yarn as we speak. Return viewers to this channel may be wondering why I was talking about entering something into the fair in this video when I've already shared the results of the items I entered into the fair, and you know what? The corset wasn't one of them. Well, I initially planned to enter this corset into the fair, and then I put it aside and forgot about it. And when I picked it back up to start making this video, I thought I was gonna have enough time to complete the corset before the fair started. It became really apparent to me though, after I finished this first half of the corset, that there was no way I was going to be able to get all of the work for this corset done in time to actually enter it into the fair. So I decided to shift gears and enter a different item in its place, which was the Mossy Ribcage Riot Top. Now, just because I didn't get to enter this into the fair does not mean that I wanted to abandon all of my work and not complete this item, especially after I got the first half of the corset done. So once I had finished working on the pattern tests that I was doing, I was able to come back and work on the corset again. This change is visible in the footage we're watching because you can see I am now wearing an orange and rusty colored sweater, and what I am working on is the second half of the corset. You know, looking back, I think it honestly would have been better if I had just frogged the whole project at the beginning of this video rather than just pulling back to the point where my stitch count was correct. This project calls for a 4mm hook with the yarn, and I was unable to hit this gauge until I downsized to a 3mm hook, and I tried increments in between and still was unable to hit the appropriate gauge. I ended up doing a gauge swatch with my 3mm hook after it came in the mail and found that I was able to hit the correct gauge, but it did seem like it was really hard to not have really tight tension working with this thicker yarn and such a small hook. By the time I got to the end of this project, I really had gotten the hang of working with this yarn and this sized hook so that my tension wasn't overly tight, but I do feel like it's kind of obvious in the beginning parts of the project. I am here looking my very best with 2 purple star stickers on the end of my nose because the entirety of the end of my nose has decided to break out. We have our first panel over here that's already completed. Fun fact, I forgot to count how many rows I did for any specific part. I just did things. So luckily, just because of the way it is constructed, I was able to easily count the ridges left over from doing the half doubles in the chain bar. I don't remember what the name of this stitch is. Anyway, due to the little ridges that are left from the construction process, I was able to count and hold the second half up to determine if I'd done the appropriate amount of rows. It would probably help if I used some sort of a tool to track what I was doing, like, I don't know, a pen and paper or an app. But instead, I'm all like, oh, I got this, and then I just do things sometimes. It doesn't matter if I figured out how long it needed to be and then did it right on this one if I can't replicate it on the second one. And I'm saying this for myself for the future so that I will actually remember to take notes when I am working off of a pattern and not just take notes when I am writing a pattern. So we've done basically all of the repeat rows we need to for the straight part to make the panel as wide as it needs to be. And now it is time to start doing the increases to flare it back out to this size at the other end and then shape the edge of, I don't know which side is which right now, so I have to look at the pattern for that. But we're gonna shape the remaining edge and then we can actually like sew the hardware in. We're getting close to actually having a finished corset. I was reminded of a song from Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas where she's like, we're closer now than ever before. So we're closer now than we've ever been before to having a finished crocheted corset. Ooh, okay, that's stupid. We're just gonna keep going. I'm going to keep working on this and we'll check back in a little while. Woo! I got back to work, chugging along, trying to finish up this corset, and if you thought that I was not gonna make another mistake, then you thought wrong, my friend. Luckily, it wasn't too big of a setback and I was able to get right back on track and didn't really have to frog too much work. But man, I tell ya, I swear this project is cursed. I ran into so many issues. The second one that I've actually already started is going swimmingly. So, you know, at least I got all of my bumps out of the way the first time around. Making this corset was truly an act of perseverance from start to finish. I just had to keep my head down and keep on keeping on despite all of the obstacles that I encountered. Here I am doing the finishing on the lacing edges where you just fold over a couple of the rows and sew them to one another, and then weaving in some of the remaining ends. Update time! Both panels are done. I wove in the remaining ends, so now what we're gonna have to do is add the hardware, like the busk to this, add the bones, and add the ties, and I think that will be it. So we're so close to the end. I am proud of myself for getting this done, despite all of the setbacks that I experienced making this. And mostly, I'm just excited to actually get to try it out and wear it. But if I want to wear it, I have to actually install the hardware, so let's go do that. Boy, if I was not already on the struggle bus, let me tell you, I certainly was trying to put on this hardware. This busk would not fit the way that it was instructed, and I know that part of it was a tension problem for me, but I honestly believe part of it is the problem with the pattern itself, because there is just not enough space to sew this down to the correct markings. But I made it happen. I found a way to sew the project together by attaching it to the exposed little ribs that are created by that half double crochet that's used for the bulk of the corset. I struggled when it came to the placement of the pin side of the busk because it tells you to put it through the stitches in a row of single crochets that you did, but I struggled to find the appropriate row and get it through the stitches without it looking bunched in some places and stretched out in others. So on the next one I'm making, I've actually made a chain space where the busk pins are supposed to go. One thing I did manage to forget about in this process is the fact that you do a little single crochet edging around the outsides of the corset itself. And so I ended up doing that, but I did that off camera on a lunch break at my work. So you won't get to see that here, but you will see it skip ahead to me sewing in all of the ends and just doing a little bit of detail kind of finish work sewing to maybe make it look a little bit better. Other than that though, it is done, and now it is finally time for us to see this finished corset. Ta-da! She's done! Overall, I would say I am super pleased with how the project ended up. This flippin' corset fought me at every step of the process. Even down to trying to get this thing on my body. I tried to put this on after finishing it last night, and I could not, for all of the money in the world, get this busk to hook together and stay in place. I'd get like 2 pins done, move on to like this middle pin right here, and in the process of getting the middle pin attached, I would unhook the first one. This happened repeatedly to the point where like my hands hurt and I could barely use them last night. So I put it down, I walked away, I gave it some space. I came back to it today, and through the process of trying it on and a little bit of trial and error, I was able to figure out a technique of how to get this on effectively. I'm not sure if this is how all corsets are because, again, this is my first corset, but when I put it on, it worked best if I started with this middle pin and then went up and got these top 2 and then down to the bottom 2. I'm not really certain if it's just my tension in making this project or a feature of the crochet corset, but the thickness of the stitches on the busk around the pins make it hard for you to get the hooks onto the pins. You really have to push from behind to move the fabric out of the way. It could be my tension playing into this as well. I'm not certain. I'm going to make another corset and I will update you with any tips and tricks that I can give you to make this more successful if any of you want to attempt to make this. To continue on high points and low points for the project, I would say another low point here is the variability of my tension. I really struggled at the beginning of this project to hit gauge. The hook side was the first side that I did, and I think you can really see some of the tension struggles visible where the busk is attached. In the scheme of things, it's a pretty minor detail. The whole thing works perfectly. It's just slightly like not the freaking neatest. I am such a perfectionist when it comes to my own work. If someone else had made this, I would be gushing over how they did such an amazing job. But when it's something that I made, I'm like, ooh, I didn't do this right. I did this wrong.
You missed the baby? You missed the blind man?
I was so disheartened with the way things were working out last night when I couldn't get this busk to hook together that I considered just scrapping it. And I mean, like, it's fine. It's functional. Look at it. It works just fine. I figured it out. But that negative voice in my head is so loud sometimes that it legitimately talks me out of doing things that are perfectly fine. I'll scrap work. There's nothing wrong with it, but I convinced myself that it didn't look good. When it came time to add lacing and cut my ribbon, I found that the amount of ribbon required to go through all of these lacing channels was just a lot. And it felt like overkill, like there's just too many openings on the back. I just skipped a few of the rows of holes. I don't know if this will impact the fit, and I can always go back in and add more ribbon to this later. Also, just a sub note, I know from watching videos about corsetry that one of the ways that they lace it makes everything meet in the middle, and I don't know how to lace like that. So I just started at the top and worked down to the bottom. I'm gonna have to look into how to lace your corset in that style. I am planning on going back and adding the boning to this just to give it that extra support and shaping. The other big challenge with this is really just learning to style it. I made a couple of example outfits for it just off the top of my dome piece out of what I could find in my wardrobe, but I'll also have to be working on, finding ways to incorporate this corset and future corsets into my wardrobe. If you have any styling tips or ideas, I am always open to suggestions. This was definitely a challenging project, even more so than I initially anticipated, in different ways as well. But I've learned so much, including learning that I really like corsets. So you can expect to see more corsets out of me and more of this corset in the future. I hope that you enjoyed watching me fumble my way through making this corset and that you weren't yelling at the screen too much throughout the process. If you did enjoy it, consider liking the video and subscribing because I upload crochet videos like this as well as tutorials every other Wednesday, and I love to make new crochet friends. Speaking of crochet friends, you can always follow me on social media. I am Graceface Creates on all platforms. Thanks again for watching, and happy crocheting! Ooh, fun! Turns out that whatever this is on my nose is not a zit, and I went to the doctor and they gave me a bunch of pills to take to get rid of it, and they don't know what it is. I'm trying to keep my head turned this way so you can't see it as bad. Pay no attention to all of the gross cuts on this side of my nose. Hey. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just standing here staring into space. Come on now, just turn that camera off, Grace. If you're not talking, then shut the damn camera off.